Hey, everybody. Welcome to another math video for all you rock stars out there. And this video is about comparing and ordering real numbers. Let's see. What could we talk about today? What did the baseball glove say to the baseball? I'll catch you later. Catch baseball. All right. Well, today's lesson target is, like I just said, we're going to be talking about comparing and ordering real numbers. This includes integers, fractions, proper, improper, decimals, mixed numbers, percents, numbers written in scientific notation, radicals, and pi. So all kinds of things. Well, before we get into that, let's talk a little bit about vocabulary, because you may have never heard that phrase, real numbers. I know if you need to know about rational numbers, I got a video on that. You should check it out. If you want to hear about irrational numbers, I got a video on that. You should check it out. But right now we're talking about real numbers, and this is the type of numbers we usually use, such as 1, 15.82, negative 0.01, 3/4, etc. They're positive and negative numbers. They're large and small numbers. They're whole numbers. They're fractions. They're decimals. These are all real numbers. Pretty much any number that you have heard a teacher talk about up to this point, as well as numbers that you're studying right now, it's pretty much any number that you've ever used. All right, let's get to work. Let's try some of these real numbers, putting them in order. Now, first things first. When we think about putting things in order, we got to know what kind of order we're putting them in. And this one asks us to put it in order from ascending. All right, so we're talking about ascending. What does ascending mean? Ascend. We're ascending the stairs. We are going uphill. And the easier way to remember that is descending. D starts with this, or descending starts with a D, which is the same word as downhill. So ascending means we're starting at the bottom with a low number and we're getting bigger. Okay, so let's just talk quickly about what we know about numbers. Fractions, if they're written as normal fractions, such as this one, okay, that means it's part of a whole, because 4/5 would be less than a whole, because a whole, an entire whole, would be 5/5, right? That would be one whole. 4/5 would be you ate 4/5 of the pizza, which means you did not eat the whole thing. So this one we already know is less than 1, okay? This one right here, clearly, it's got a decimal, it's 1.37. That is greater than 1. Okay, now we have an improper fraction. An improper fraction tells us that it's got a bigger numerator than denominator. So in other words, if a pizza is broken into fourths, all right, they ate 7 of those fourths, which means they ate more than one pizza. Okay, so this answer is greater than 1. Okay, 92%. Okay, 92%. How do we turn a percent into a decimal to find out how big it is? We just get rid of that percent sign, and then otherwise we divide by 100. So we move that over, and it would be 0.92, which is part of a whole, right? That's part of a whole. It's not an entire whole. A whole would be 1.0. So this answer is less than 1. And then we got a square root symbol here. And what is the square root of 16? What does that mean? That's a number that is multiplied by itself to get to 16, and that answer would be 4. Okay, so let's make life easier on ourselves and see if we can get rid of any of this before we do any other conversions and whatnot. So we want to go from smallest to largest, and we have two numbers on here that are less than 1. Two numbers that are less than 1. I'm going to change the color so we can go back to that. We have this one that is less than 1. And we have this one that is less than 1. So those are the two that are going to be the smallest. Now we just got to figure out which one it is. Okay, so I'm going to circle those again. I'm going to clear this board, circle those again. Circle 4/5 and circle 92%. And we said 92% was actually, it's always easier, in my opinion, to turn them into percents. So let's leave 92% alone. But we know if we did it to a decimal, because we just talked about it, it would be 0.82. So let's turn this top one into let's turn it into a decimal, which means we have to go through the fraction part first. So in order to turn it into a decimal first, we have to turn it into a fraction by setting it equal to something over 100, because something over 100 means we can use the place value chart. Some of you know 4/5 automatically. You broke a whole into 5 parts, and you have 4 of those parts, and so you're able to figure it out. But this is just a Quick way that I like to teach people. How many times, what do we have to do to 5 to get to 100? Because we're trying to find an equivalent fraction to 4/5, right? So we multiply 5 times 20. 5 times 20 is 100, which means we have to multiply the top by the same thing for it to be equivalent. 4 times 20 is 80, okay? Any number over 100 is automatically a percent. 80% is your answer there. So now, again, we can start over. We're dealing with 2 of them to find the smallest number. We have 80% and we have 90%, 92%. Which one of those is smaller? 80%. Okay, so let's go ahead and clear this, and since both of those are less than 1, we know that this is the smallest and this would be in second place. Okay, so I'm going to clear the board and go ahead and label those real quick. All right, so we have this would be the smallest one right here, and this will be second place. Okay, now we're going back and looking at the other 3. Now let's use some common sense to kind of figure out which direction we're going to go. All right, so this is 1.37, which is a whole and a little bit more. Okay, so it's not quite to 2 wholes. It's somewhere between 1 and 2 wholes. 7/4. Okay, if we turn that into a mixed number, we have 1 3/4. Okay, 1 3/4, which is the same thing. It's a whole and somewhere to the next whole. Okay, we're not quite sure where yet, but we're in between 1 and 2 wholes. So now we got those 2. And finally, we said this one was 4. So that's definitely our biggest one, right? That is definitely our biggest answer because the other 2 are somewhere between 1 and 2, and this one is 4. So now we've got 3 of our answers figured out, right? So now we know that this is the third biggest. I'm sorry, this is the biggest one. So that will be our 5th one because it is the largest one. Okay, so I'll go ahead and make that our 5th. Now we just got to figure out these other 2. These other 2 right here, which are 1.37 and 7/4. Okay, let's go back into that now. 1.37, let's go ahead and turn it into a percent. If you have a decimal and you want to turn it into a percent, you're just multiplying it by 100. So which means move the decimal 2 places to the right, and we get 137%. Okay. Whoa, what is that? Let's try that eraser again. And then we'll go back here and try to draw a real line between those percents because that was hideous. Okay, now we got 1 3/4. Okay, so let's turn that into percent. Well, we already know the whole is 4/4. So what was left over? We said it was 1 3/4. Let's turn 3/4 into a decimal first, which we set it equal to 100. 4 times what is 100? 25. So we multiplied the bottom by 25 to get to 100. So the top by 25 is 75. All right, so now let's go ahead and turn, let me erase that real quick. And so we can deal with what we have right there, which is going to be, we have a whole and we have 0.75. All right, we have a whole, 4/4 and 3/4. So we have a whole, and then we have 0.75. Okay, that is our decimal. Okay, so let's turn it into percent. Move it 2 to the right, and we get 175%. All right, which is bigger, 137% or 175%? That is correct. 137 is smaller, so it is going to be our 3rd biggest one, and 175% is going to be our 4th biggest one, and we already know that this was our 5th biggest one. So there we did it. Sometimes don't just go through them all and put them all into one thing. See if there's anything you can take out of the way. We really didn't have to work with this guy at all because it was clearly the biggest. Okay, let's see what's next. Now we're going to put these in descending order. Okay, let's use some common sense and see if there's anything we can do to put them in descending order. Okay, if you've watched my scientific notation video, you know that I went on and on about scientific notation and negative exponents, and we went on and on about how if this number is positive and this number is positive, this negative doesn't make it a negative number. It just moves it over and makes it a smaller version of that number. It's not smaller. It won't go past 0 because it's just moves in the decimal place, okay? So let me erase that just to make sure we understand that. So the reason I told you that is because every other number, this is positive, this one's positive, this one's positive, this one's positive, this one's positive. We have a negative answer here, because it's asking you to do the square root of 225, and whatever that is, give us the opposite. Okay, so that is going to be our smallest number, because it's the only negative number we have, okay? So let's go ahead and label that. All right, so descending, we're starting with the biggest number and going backwards. So this is going to be our smallest number. Okay, we know that this one equals 3.14 dot dot dot, goes on forever. Okay, this one, how do we do scientific notation? You take your number and then you say move the decimal, and then you say which direction, 2 places to the left. So if we take 9.37 and we move the decimal 2 places to the left, we are going to get 0.0937. I'm going to erase some of that so you can see it better. 0.0937, all right, equals 0.0937. Okay, and then the same thing over here. We have 1.367. Move the decimal 4 places to the right. This is going to be a huge number. All right, if we're going to move the decimal 4 places to the right, we're going to have quite the big number, because that means we're going to take it and go 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's an extra spot there, so I'm adding a 0. Let me look at that again. That means 13,670. Okay, 13,670. And then finally up here we have 1 and 4/10. Did you hear how I said that? 1 and 4/10. Well, if you know place value, you know you got 1 and, what is that spot? Tenths. How many of them do I have? 4. So now we got all our numbers. Okay, we only have to deal with those last 4 numbers, those first 4 numbers, because the last one we know is going to be the smallest. All right, so let's go ahead. I'm going to change these color real quick so that we can see what we're doing. This one we know is going to be our biggest, okay? I mean our smallest. What is our biggest number? 13,670, 3.14, 0.0937, which is not even a whole. Like 0.0937 means we haven't even reached 1 yet. We are less than 1. And then we have 1.4. Well, the largest number is clearly 13,670. So that is our biggest. Then after that, we have a 3, we have a 0, and we have a 1. So 3.14 is our second biggest. Then we go up here to 1.4. That's our third biggest. And then we go here. That's our fourth biggest. Fourth smallest. And then we go this direction. Here we're getting smaller, right? Big, a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller, a little bit smaller. Break them down so you get to the answer. Okay, so let's take a look at this one. We got to place these real numbers on the number line, okay? Let's start with the ones that we know that are probably the easiest, which is the first one is this one. What does pi equal? Well, 3.14, and it goes on forever because it's an irrational number. But there's only one box up there. We have 1, 2, 3. Okay, there's only one box up there that's between 3 and 4. So pi is going to go right there. Okay, and now let's look at the square root of 57. Okay, square root of 57. Actually, let's do these 2 decimals real quick because they give us everything we need to know. So let's take care of this one first. 7.99526, okay? That's real close to 8. So my guess is it's going to go right there, okay? But let's just make sure because there's 2 lines that go inside of 7 and 8, okay? And this number is between 7 and 8. So let's go take a look at this other positive number, square root of 57. So this is where you have to use that approximation of trying to figure out what this actually is. And if we can get a decimal number by using our common sense or our math sense, we should be able to get there. So the square root of 57, which 2 perfect squares are on either side? Well, hopefully at this point you know your perfect squares. Square root of 49 is the one that's closest to it below because that's 7 times 7. And then the square root of 64 is the one that is above it, because that is 8 times 8. Okay, so we know that it's somewhere in between there. So when we know it's between there, that's when we can start playing with the numbers. All right, it's between 7 and 8. So it's going to, the first whole number is going to be 7, and then after that we can figure out what that is. So I'm going to use my little friend over here, Alexa, and see what she says. Alexa, what is 7.5 times 7.5? All right, so that gives us 56.25. 7.5 gives us 56.25. So I think we're going to have to make another jump up another couple tenths because we're not quite up there. So let's do 7.7. Alexa, what's 7.7 times 7.7? 7.7 times 7.7 is 59.29. All right, we went way too far. All right, so let's do 7.8 and see where that gets us. Alexa, so what's 7.8 times 7.8? 7.8 times 7.8 60.84. That does not seem... Oh, I guess we went too big. Oh, I'm sorry. I should have went 7.6. I'm sorry. Alexa, what's 7.6 times 7.6?
7.6 times 7.6 is 57.76.
57.76 is 7.6. That gets us a little too big. So that should give us all the information that we need. So 7.6. So it's going to be somewhere like 7.8, 7.58 or 7.5 something, because 7.6 is just a little too big, right? So this answer is going to be 7.5 something, and this one is 7.9. So now we know what those two boxes are. This box right here, 7.99, is going to be the bigger one. Okay? And then this is going to be the square root of 57. Okay? Let me erase a bunch of this stuff off my screen so now we can go figure out the other side. Okay? And the other side is going to tell us we have two negative numbers. Okay? We have two negative numbers that we have to deal with now. And so now we're focused on this one and this one. We're going to have to play that same game, I bet, trying to figure out which one's bigger or smaller. So we already know what this one is. Let's go focus on the bottom one. What are the two perfect squares that are close to it? Well, 7.81, and then, I'm sorry, square root of 81, and then we have the square root of 100. Okay, square root of 81, the opposite of square root of 81 is going to be negative 9, and the opposite of square root of 100 is going to be negative 10. So it's somewhere in between those, and we have to figure out which one of these is going to go in which box, okay? So let's go ask Alexa. Alexa, what's 9.3 times 9.3?
9.3 times 9.3 is 86.49.
That gave us 86.49. Okay? That's way too big. Way too big. Okay? So we want to get a little bit closer. So let's get away from 9.3 and let's maybe do 9.1. Alexa, what's 9.1 times 9.1? That gave us 82.81. Okay? 82.81. So let's go a little bit bigger. Let's do, Alexa, what's 9.25 times 9.25?
9.25 times 9.25 is 85.5625.
So 9.2, that was 85.65. 85.65 was 9.25. Okay, so now 9.25 made us a little bit too big. Just a little bit too big. Okay, so we're probably going to be around the 9.24, which means this one is 9.26, and this one is negative 9.24. So this one is, the number's bigger, but it's a negative side, which means it's going in the opposite direction. So it is going to go right here, negative 9.268. And then this one would be the other one, negative square root of 85. It's kind of tricky. Those are tough because they're trying to make you just think that you can look at the numbers and figure out which one's bigger or smaller, but it's not the case. You have to do this rationalizing and playing with the decimals to figure out what's there. You could also use a calculator to kind of help you navigate some of those tougher ones. Okay, last one. Which are listed in descending order. Descending, which means we're going downhill, which means we're taking our biggest number here and our smallest number here. Okay, so let's use some math common sense before we just start converting everything. What's bigger, negative or positive numbers? Positive numbers are bigger, okay? And we have a variety. Each one of these has a negative, a negative, a negative, and a positive. So this has to be our biggest number because it's the only one that is positive, right? So that means we can say these two, because they started with negative numbers, are not the biggest, okay? Then it looks like all we got to do is figure out which one of these is bigger. Which one of these is bigger, okay? And so what we have to do is turn them both into percents. And remember that 1/3 is that one you just have to remember. 1/3, you can do the math. You can say 1 divided by 3 in your calculator, and it's going to come out as negative 0.333. And then we turn that into a percent by doing what? Move the decimal 2 to the right. And so our answer would be 33.3%, okay? Negative 33.3%. So which is bigger, negative 33.3% or negative 66%? Keep in mind that negative number. So negative 66 would be farther on the left because it's moving farther that direction. Negative 33 would be closer. So this is the next biggest one. Okay, so that means if we know that negative 1/3 is going to be closer to 0 than negative 66, which means it's bigger, we know D has to be the right answer. Okay, because then they just keep getting smaller and smaller. So in other words, 0.33, 0.45, 0.66. Okay, D needs to be the answer. Okay, that one's a little tricky. Messing around with irrational numbers because of the square root. Sometimes you got to figure it out to the 10th place, the 100th place. You got to dive in. Okay, it is really, really tough sometimes to figure that out. It's tough for football coaches too when they're trying to figure out their money situation because they want to know, why did the football coach go to the bank? Yep, he went to the bank because he was trying to get his quarterback. Quarterback? I'll see you rock stars later! Quarterback. It's awesome. Not to be confused with the great band Nickelback.